Good afternoon, everybody. My name is the Colonist, and I am here in front of you today, back in the Colonial Dungeon, if you recall from back in the days of doing the storyline updates. And speaking of storylines, I'm here in front of you today primarily because I wanted to address 5 easy fixes that WWE could make to improve their product. Now, before I get started, I want to provide a disclaimer. I would definitely classify myself as a member of the following. I am a smart mark, and I say that knowing full well that there's a bad stigma, but I also will say that I am well aware that when it comes to actual in the business experience, the only perspective I have is that of a fan. Number 2, I am addressing this as part of what is called the Internet Wrestling community. And the IWC, as it is, has a lot of very opinionated members, some of whom have a certain idea of what the business should be and what they're looking for versus something that I'm looking for. So I'm giving this disclaimer to you in the sense that I want it to be understood that this is my opinion alone. And I have been very outspoken. It's going to sound keyboard warrior-esque, but I've been outspoken on Facebook. I've discussed a lot of what I think are the problems with WWE, why they're in such this weird creative deadlock. So here are 5 easy fixes that I think could go in that could improve the product to the ratings and the level that it was in the Attitude Era. And I'll say this now. No, one of them is not going back to TV 14. WWE does not need to be TV 14 for them to be successful. WCW, in the entire run where they outdid WWE, was a PG show. And they did it, and they won the ratings week after week because of the way they promoted themselves, the way they booked their matches, and the storylines that they had in between to glue the show together. So number 1, the biggest problem with WWE, and I'm also going to say this, I'm writing these down and I'm explaining these to you in the sense that I'm not changing any creative push or burying anybody in this process. We're going under the assumption that WWE is going to continue pushing the people that they're going to push and continue burying the people they're going to bury. That is staying the same throughout the entire time that I'm talking to you. Number 1 is the managers. Roman Reigns gets a lot of flack, particularly from the IWC, and got booed out of the building at the Royal Rumble. And I'm going to start by saying that I actually do not mind Roman Reigns as a competitor. He has a thirst for the business that you can tell. It's in his blood. It's in his genes. The problem is WWE has this idea, and the IWC has this idea, if they are coinciding, which they are a little at this point, that you need to be the total package, and I'm not talking Lex Luger, the total package to be a WWE superstar. Meaning, you need to have athletic ability, which Roman Reigns has to some extent. Sure, does he have a massive amount of moves? No. But can he tell the story in the ring? Yes. You need to have the mic skills, and this is where Roman Reigns really falters. Tater tots should never have been uttered in a WWE ring, much less from Roman Reigns. That should not have happened. And neither should have been the "I will be the Royal Rumble winner." Yeah, everybody remembers that. And I'm not even going to address how poorly booked the Royal Rumble last year was because everybody knows. The biggest thing that could help Roman Reigns is a full-fledged, true-to-life Jimmy Hart, Bobby the Brain Heenan, Classy Freddie Blassie, all of these older, Paul Heyman. The thing that made people like Brock Lesnar so spectacular. Now, I will say that Brock is in a genre of his own because his athletic ability is unmatched, and everybody is aware of that. But everybody also knows that Brock Lesnar is not 100% God's gift to the microphone. And that's the difference. Paul Heyman is just as important to Brock Lesnar, the character, as Brock Lesnar, the athlete, is to the wrestling industry, to WWE. Without Paul Heyman there, Brock Lesnar doesn't have the same majestic lure that brings people in, because Paul Heyman has that exact way of getting to the people's minds and getting people to think and promoting not only himself and his client, but promoting WWE, promoting his matches. True managers, if you bring back true-to-life managers who go in, who promote the show, who can promote the talent that they're managing, can promote the match to get people to want to watch, to get people to draw to the WWE Network, which they do not need to plug 110% of the time. And you wouldn't need to. If you had enough managers managing the talent that don't have the strength on the microphone as they do in the ring, if you had the managers there, so much would change. Because adding a manager, at least I'm a very traditionalist, so I'm a guy who looks at the wrestling industry and says, look at how much a manager is helping, and I'll use Jay Lethal as an example. Jay Lethal is a great guy on the mic. He's improved significantly, even just in the past year. But Truth Martini adds just a little bit more traction to him, because you never know when Truth's gonna come in and make some sort of shenanigans happen. It just adds to it. So proper managers would be a step in the right direction, and it's an easy fix. You can find them. Hell, you can train them. You can make them grow and evolve through people like Dash and Dawson, and I'll give them credit, they're great on the mic too for what they're trying to do. But also consider what made the Road Warriors so good when they first started out was having Paul Ellering there to really glue the team together when they hadn't come up with their big hoopla of the and the what a rush and all of that. Paul Ellering was huge in getting them off their feet. Same thing with ECW when you look at Van Dam, and I don't remember his name now. But in that same ideal, if wrestling managers were around to make sure that people aren't falling asleep at the wheel when it comes to mic skills, the drawing power of the superstars who don't have the strength on the mic would drastically increase. Number 2, a big problem with WWE, and I'm mostly referring to WWE at this point when I'm talking about the fixes, and I will acknowledge other companies, but we'll get to that. The biggest problem with WWE right now is because Vince McMahon is catering to A, himself, because he's out of touch with the casual fans, and B, because he's focusing a lot on what the internet has to say. Look at Daniel Bryan, WrestleMania 30. Enough said. Look at Roman Reigns, not getting the push that Vince McMahon wanted him to get. It's all lined up there. And the fact that the IWC is getting more attention day by day in WWE creative, and the same can be said for TNA, and to some extent, not a lot, but to some extent you can make that case for Ring of Honor. But the problem is the IWC is kind of like the Young Bucks. They're spot monkeys. They're looking for spots, they're looking for high impact, they're looking for top rope. It's like WCW infatuated the IWC with the cruiserweight division to such a degree that that is what they're considering the standard. So when guys like Big Show, now, I mean, obviously he's older, but when guys like Big Show or people like him come in, they're not satisfied because they're not doing these big moves, these putting their bodies on the line for entertainment. It's bloodthirsty. It's almost spectator to gladiator battles-esque that a lot of the IWC, not all, but a lot of the IWC does choose to promote. That's what they want. And so when they're not given spot after spot after spot after spot, they think it's not a good match. They yell boring, they yell chant, and that's a huge, huge problem. And we'll get to that as number 3. But the problem is when somebody is trying to tell a story in the ring, and it takes time. It takes time to tell a story in the ring. And I think part of that is on Vince, and part of that is on the WWE to give the time to the talent and have the faith in the talent to tell the story the way it deserves to be told. But on the flip side of that, the fans, to some extent, when you look at places like Philly and New York City, and even some other places around the country, where they'll chant boring when they're just setting up the next move in order to pay it off. And I think that a lot of wrestling psychology, and you can ask anyone, any of the old school talent. The Undertaker just came up with an interview lately that talked about this. I hate to bring up Russo, but Russo talks about it. A lot of people who are no longer part of WWE talk about the fact that psychology is a lost art. The wrestling psychology to bring up, to really make move after move deliberate, make it have a purpose, make it have, there's a reason you're doing the move you're doing, not just for the sake of saying, oh, that was cool, this is awesome. Yeah, it may be awesome, but if there's no justification behind what you're doing, what's the point? And if you look at it, that's a lot of the reason why casual fans don't watch anymore. Because they have no reason to feel for why the characters do what they do. So I think bringing back guys like, I don't know what's going on with Jake the Snake Roberts lately, because he's, if you saw, you probably didn't see the video with him and the Bray Wyatt stuff. Don't worry about it. But people like Jake Roberts, people like Scott Hall, people like the classic heels, rest in peace, Roddy Piper, people like Dusty Rhodes, they knew how to make every move worth something, make it mean something, even if it wasn't the flashiest move. They could make a right hand and they could promote that right hand like it was the most important move in the match, if they had the justification behind it. Which leads me to number 3, which is justify your actions. In the ring, out of the ring, regardless. The biggest problem with creative right now, at least in my expertise, which is not a whole lot, so take it for what it's worth. But in my opinion, the biggest problem with WWE's creative right now is that they do not have any means to justify why a feud is happening. And if they do, they use it through dialogue. They go, oh, you did this to me, and now I'm going to be against you. And that's it. Some people are fighting just for the sake of, hey, I don't like you. You don't like me. Let's fight about it. And that's it. And what goes along with the psychology is having the creative backing to say, why are these two fighting? What's the purpose? There's an improv saying. Shout out to Kevin Daly, if you're watching, who's an old improv teacher of mine. Every time that you choose to make a game move or you're trying to progress the story, there are 2 questions you need to ask. 1, if that's true, why is it true? So let's take, here's a great example. Back in 2002, Triple H says, my new manager is Shawn Michaels. Shawn Michaels comes out, Eric Bischoff pisses him off, Michaels storms back. Triple H is like, hey, I got a better idea, put on this shirt. It's a DX shirt. So they come out later on in the show, and this is in August, this is early August. They come out in the show, they do the DX thing, and he says, let's get ready to suck it, pedigree Shawn Michaels. And everyone's stunned, like what the hell was that? So the next night, on Raw, Triple H says, I never needed Shawn Michaels. He held me back. He propelled himself to the top. I used Shawn to get to the top the same way Shawn used me to stay at the top. And I quote. And every single piece of that dialogue meant something. When he attacked Shawn Michaels in the back, put his head through a car window, and Triple H feigned like, oh, I don't know who did this to you. Oh, wait, it was me. It was obviously me, because you're not who you once were, Shawn Michaels. That feud, which progressed through the course of 3 years, had so much history behind it, had so much passion, had so much emotion behind it, justified. If that's true, why is it true? Because that is why Shawn Michaels got to where he was using Triple H, forming DX, and kind of kick-starting the Attitude Era. In the same way, Triple H was able to use that to propel himself to 3 years of dominance on Monday Night Raw. And that's just from a storyline perspective. And the second question in the improv is, if that's true, what else is true? And then you say that, Shawn Michaels, you had your back injury. You can't wrestle anymore. You're coming back. I took you down because you can't do it. You're not worth it. You're a shell of what you were. And Shawn Michaels says, that may be true, but what else is true is I still have the heart and the passion, and I know I can make one more run, and I will take you out at SummerSlam. And then Shawn Michaels comes back and has arguably the better run of his two. It's all about justifying why it is two people are feuding. Even in 2004, when the Hell in a Cell match happened, at Bad Blood, Shawn Michaels, Triple H, all of the history was there. All of the justification was there. All of the emotion was there. And that made that match so much more spectacular, on top of the fact that Vince gave them over 45 minutes to tell the story. So having that justification present as why two people even care about fighting each other, let alone the actual match itself. The build-up that any wrestler has to any other wrestler in the WWE is shot. But to Triple H's credit, you're seeing that arise more in NXT. You see people have a reason to fight. Is it perfect? No. But it's still there. And all WWE would need to do is ask themselves those two questions before a feud starts. If that's true, why is it true? And if that's true, what else is true? Number 4. And this one is going a fair stretch for WWE. Because WWE loves this idea. And they have this mentality that they are the only game in town. Which is simply not true. Because there's TNA, and there's Ring of Honor, and there's New Japan Pro Wrestling, and there's Lucha Underground, and there's a whole bunch of indie circuit stuff. But I don't blame WWE for having that mentality, because if you're looking at ratings alone, if you're looking at the fan base alone, WWE, sure, from having 6 million viewers at one point in the Attitude Era to having almost little over 3 million viewers now, losing almost half of their audience. There is no wrestling company in the world that is even half of that. There is no wrestling company that even has 1.5 million viewers. You could make the argument for New Japan, but I don't even think New Japan is making that much. TNA never was even close to half, and nobody is even in the league of WWE, so it makes sense that they would believe that they are the only game in town. And on top of that, WWE realistically is the only place for professional wrestling or sports entertainment, whatever you want to call it, where you can make legitimately good money. And that is fact. And it's a shame, but it's fact. Now, what the problem is WWE wants to farm raise and grow their own talent, build every character, build every storyline, build every guy coming in, even if they're from the independent circuit, or if they're from companies like TNA, or Ring of Honor, or New Japan, or Lucha Underground, which I don't think they've pulled anybody from Lucha Underground just yet. But, at the same time, they're putting too much work on themselves. WWE, yes, NXT is great. NXT is the best part of WWE right now. There's no disputing that, at least in my most humble opinion. But they're using people like Prince Devitt, who made such a reputation for himself in New Japan, that when he came in as Finn Balor, most people still remembered him as Prince Devitt. Same thing with Hideo Itami, or Kenta. Same thing with all of these guys, they've come in. The only anomaly in that entire system has been Samoa Joe. Because not even Kevin Steen was or at least not even Kevin Steen was devoid of having his name changed. And albeit, Kevin Owens decided to do that on his own in memory of Owen Hart, which I respect dearly. But not even he was free to still be what he was in the indie circuit. And you look at Samoa Joe, who had 12 or 13 years in the business already with Ring of Honor and TNA and New Japan. He is the only one who had enough star power to come into WWE as himself, as the same guy, same name, a whole 9 yards. That is something rare. And now, I don't know what's going to happen now that AJ Styles has supposedly been signed to WWE, as well as I believe Nakamura has been signed from New Japan, as well as a couple other Bullet Club members. But in any event, AJ Styles will probably get to keep his name. The rest, probably not. The thing that needs to happen now with WWE, which is my topic number 4, is it would not hurt WWE in the slightest to make acknowledgement of the other wrestling companies around the world. Say, oh, AJ Styles made his reputation in TNA, and he built TNA from the ground up. Then he went to Ring of Honor and did a bunch of Ring of Honor stuff, and has recently been the IWGP or whatever. He's been the New Japan Pro Wrestling Heavyweight Champion a couple times. What that does for WWE, because you could ask, what's to gain from that from WWE? What's to gain from WWE acknowledging other companies is twofold. The first being, it's saving them time. It's saving them time of building another character. Building someone who already has the character, the repertoire, the mic skills perhaps, that they've acquired over the years as in the indie circuit. All they need to do is adjust to the WWE system, cater to the cameras, do specific spots in specific places. But that is not correlated with the reputation they've built in the outside of WWE. If WWE acknowledged these other companies, it would help the wrestling industry, because it would build up these other companies not even close to competition. They wouldn't even get to the point that WWE is right now, because WWE arguably has a pretty strong death grip on the wrestling industry as we know it, at least in America. If you acknowledge something like New Japan, sure, are people going to tune in to view it? Yeah. Why that's a bad thing? It's not. It's not a bad thing. Because now you have stars who can really develop themselves, can grow a reputation on the outside, and come into WWE already with what they've accumulated. They have a reputation. They have accolades. They have more weight to them. If they bring in somebody like AJ Styles, it's a big deal. If they built up, let's say for all intensive purposes, that EC3, who was back in WWE NXT for like 40 minutes and then was released. But think about how EC3 has grown as a superstar. And let's say that they bring him back. And they say he's changed so much since he was here in WWE. He's a former world champion now. He had a winning streak that has been unmatched, defeating former WWE stars like Matt and Jeff Hardy and many others along the road. Include, I think he beat Samoa Joe, but the point is, they don't have to do nearly as much work building the star up. They can have them come in, which is what made the switches between WWE and WCW in the 90s so important. When people like Scott Hall and Kevin Nash went to WCW, the world knew who they were. And likewise, when Guerrero, Benoit, Malenko, and Saturn came into WWE, the WWE audience was like, oh shit, we know them, they're from WC, they're the other guys. Chris Jericho, he's new, but he's from the other side. He's now coming in and making his impact on WWE. All it would take is just a little acknowledgement, and they would save them so much time. It would save them so much effort, and maybe we wouldn't see groups like Adam Rose and Curtis Axel and all these horrid gimmicks come out, because WWE just doesn't have an idea for them. If you build them up and say, or if you just let them build themselves, give more faith in the talent themselves, say, hey, AJ Styles, former world champion in like 4 different companies. Here he is, here in WWE. This is a big deal. People are going to be invested in them from the get-go. They're going to have fans, and it's going to draw fans from those other companies to watch them in WWE, in turn building WWE's audience. And number 5, and this one is probably the most controversial of all of them. The biggest issue right now, a lot of people, especially in the IWC, are blaming Vince, are blaming Kevin Dunn for the current state of WWE and the fact that they have all the power. Vince has the final creative say. And that might be true. I don't know. But here's the problem. You look at places like Philly and New York City, very smarky towns, and there's nothing to be taken away from smarky towns. They're great wrestling fans. They like what they like. But when you have fans trying to hijack a show with their chants, when the fans believe that they're as much of an importance to the show as the WWE talent, that is a huge problem. A huge problem. Because WWE talent, when you look at Sheamus, sure, I'm not a big fan of Sheamus, but he had his moments. When you get people chanting boring at Sheamus, when you get people chanting boring at Sasha Banks, when you're getting chants like this is awesome or this is boring, or trying to do ridiculous stuff like the NXT crowd does at Full Sail fairly often, when you have that type of chaos happening, it's tough for the WWE to progress. WWE needs to recenter themselves and remember that they themselves are the ones who hold all of the cards in the deck. Yes, there are going to be IWC fans who are going to chant CM Punk. There are going to be fans, and it's not just IWC, it could be live crowd. It doesn't matter. It depends on where the product lies. It depends on where they are, who they're watching. That's all dependent, and I'm not missing one thing, but WWE needs to acknowledge, hey, we're the ones writing it. We're the ones in control, and if we justify why people are feuding, you are going to like what we're putting out. The problem is they're listening almost too much to the fans who believe they know everything about the business, which is why I put the disclaimer before this video started, claiming that I do not. But if WWE said, look, we're writing, we have the creative ability, we will get the job done, and they don't listen to the CM Punks or the boring chants or any of those. If they push that audience out, not out of the arena, but out of the creative mentality, they could easily turn the ship around. If they want to push Roman Reigns to the moon, they can and should. But they need to do it with storylines, with justification. Not because the IWC and everybody else hates him because he has no mic skills or what have you. You give Roman Reigns a mouthpiece, you give him a reason for fighting, and you give him a reason for frustrations, which at TLC they did. And then they went right back to what they were doing, which is why this is so maddening. As a fan, it's so maddening to see the creative direction. It doesn't have to be that way. They need to take back the power. They need to renew the confidence in themselves. And then the 20-man creative they have on payroll getting paid to do what they're not doing. Because Vince has the final say, apparently. It's an easy fix. Take back your power, throw in some managers, justify your storylines, let the talent, give faith in your talent to tell the story in the ring as well as what you're providing them outside the ring, and acknowledge talent so you don't have to do nearly as much work writing those storylines because they've already done half of that, and WWE goes back to the numbers they've seen in years past. That is my opinion. Thank you for sitting and listening through this in the Colonial Dungeon. We might have another one about other topics. This is the first time I've ever done something like this, so let me know how I did. Give me some comments, follow me on Twitter, CIW Colonist. And thank you very much for watching, and we will see you next time.